Some of the content covered may be graphic in nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely it's really
Just, I love stories like this because it's
scared to death. Yeah, that's a real thing.
There are countless horror stories, sex trafficking,
you shouldn't fuck with.
right? And
the JFK assassination all
to real.
Whoops. Well, there you have it. In typical Type 3 fashion. For the mistake on the lake, I bid you all good morning, good evening, wherever you are, wherever you're listening from. This is Type 3TV. I'm your host, John Flincy, alongside my faithful co-hosts, Danny Green.
What's up?
And Steve Buddha Gibson. So, how you gentlemen doing this evening?
Better than you.
Yeah, I know.
Fascinating.
I can't believe I messed that up again. Right off the rip. And we've had
Make
more...
fun of me taking too long to talk.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. I just, I turned on the, there's an audio feed for the music that goes on that's supposed to start. And then I realized that it was, the volume was turned all the way down from the last time I had this open. So, anyway, there you have it, folks. Production at its finest. You guys want to get into some news real quick?
We do.
Yeah.
I know. You guys talk at the same time. Now you guys should kiss. All right.
Again?
Yeah, okay. So anyway.
How many times do you want to see that?
All right. Job application filled out by former Apple CEO Steve Jobs in 1973 has sold for a whopping $222,000 or $222,400 in auction. And basically, it's what it is. It's a poorly typed, well, I guess it would be good for the time, typewriter, name, address, phone number, major, and then it's filled out by Steve Jobs with his birthday. And it says that he has a computer skills and calculator skills. So $224,000 for a piece of paper filled out by Steve Jobs. All right. Wow. Boo, did you buy that?
Yes. Ridiculous.
All right. Next thing I saw, so interesting thing. Researchers find the secret of the bunny hop. It's all in the genes. This is from theguardian.com. I guess what it has to do with it says that researchers say by studying an unusual breed of bunny that walks on its front paws, which is kind of weird because these rabbits are literally just walking on their hands while their other two back legs are sticking up in the air. It says they have pointed out a key gene that is necessary for animals to adopt a typical trait. For rabbits, as well as animals such as hares and kangaroos, it is the ability to hop. So they found the gene that basically causes them to walk on their front legs, and they narrowed it down to being the same gene that causes a rabbit to hop. So genetics.
Quite interesting.
Yeah, what the fuck?
I know, it's weird stories off of science today.
Must have been some slow days in the labs there, people, researchers.
Yeah. All right, on the next one, Dan, this one's for you here. Basically, China military bans Tesla cars, citing that the camera, saying that it's a potential spy concern. I don't know if you saw anything about this.
Yeah, yeah, I actually did. I read a little bit. I didn't go into full detail, but I heard something about that. And was it named Elon Musk basically came out and said, yeah, that's of course BS, but that's interesting. If any car would do it, though, the Tesla would be the car that could do it.
Well, I know that I've heard that there's concern like with military bases having Chinese made cameras, and so that all cameras on military bases have to be American made because they're concerned about, microelectronics and being spyware. So, I mean, it makes sense that anything American made might be the same concern overseas. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cars. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, of all the countries to sit there and talk about potential spies, literally China just calling, what is it? The pot calling the kettle black.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you say that now? Should the kettle be white?
2022 Cadillac CT5 Blackwing is all completely hand built. Did you see this story, Dan?
The engine is hand built, right?
Yeah, the engine is completely hand built. The LTV or LT4.
I'm sorry. What was the car again? The Cadillac
CT5V Blackwing.
Okay, yeah. The CT6 actually had a handmade engine, handmade V8 engine, and it only lasted. They only built like 200 of them, and then they discontinued. In typical ridiculous General Motors fashion, they finally get the car perfectly right, and they discontinue it. But yeah, that was. I've been reading about that. Car's got like disgusting amount of horsepower, 600, I think, 650.
650 horsepower and 659 compared to a 650 pound feet
Torque.
a pound of torque. Yeah. So
Yep.
So yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, how long does it take for like something like that to be assembled if they're assembling it by hand?
Well, usually it's one person that actually assembles the engine. I mean, it can take obviously a couple days to a week, depending on what their obviously what their specifications are. I mean, Bentley and Rolls-Royce, they build all their cars by hand. The entire car is built by hand.
Really?
And those usually,
Well,
yeah.
Isn't all the hand leather or the leather like hand stitched?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Hand stitched. Everything is hand stitched. It's amazing. That's why you pay so much money for those cars, because they have so much handcrafted work in them on those cars. And General Motors, I actually thought they were getting rid of that Blackwing engine. I didn't realize that, it was a Blackwing, right?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. I thought they actually got rid of that engine. I'm shocked that they brought it back out again, because I think the car is called Blackwing. I didn't know the engine, they brought that engine back up because it's a V8.
Yeah, it says there's never been a more powerful Cadillac than the CT5 Blackwing. The successor to the CT5 and shorter brother of the CT6 rocks a good old pushrod V8 engine with a thumping great blower, and similarly to the Mercedes AMG, every single LT4 V8 is assembled by hand by one person. So yeah, that's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. GM's up in their game finally.
But if you think about that, though, like, okay, so yes, handcrafted, more expensive, but what's crafted better? I think I would, would you trust the robotic precision, or would you rather have a handcrafted product? That's the question.
Right. Well,
I think,
go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Blue.
They're not so much handcrafted as they are hand assembled. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the dudes are sitting there banging out fenders, making them by hand. The shit's still getting stamped and pressed.
Right. As far as the engine, yeah. I mean, the cars we're referring to, Rolls and Bentley and things like that. Those cars are handcrafted, but you're right about the engine. They're not. Yeah, they're not making the stamping the fenders and making the wheels from scratch, obviously. But
the only reason they're so expensive is because people are willing to pay that much money. That is the only reason.
Well, yeah, a name that's a name.
But the point,
Bentley and Rolls-Royce.
But they're willing to spend that much money because it's a status thing. That's
oh,
all.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's your thing. That's cool. But anything is only ever going to be worth as much as somebody's willing to spend.
Absolutely. Right. And when you throw handcrafted on and anything that's a car that is built by hand, that shoots the value through the sky. I mean, through the roof. And only cars that are like we said, handcrafted are Rolls-Royce, Bentley. I think there's a couple Mercedes-Benz, but yeah, absolutely right. It's a status thing. That's all it is.
Aren't the Aston Martins done by hand too?
I believe they are, and I think so is Bugatti. Because Bugatti only makes like
4 a year.
Yeah, right. Because they're only like $2 million each.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, did you ever see that video? I think it was a dude in a Bugatti, and he's like riding down the street, and somebody in like a Honda Civic just pulls out and hits him. And you know what? That's what you fucking get for driving a Bugatti in a fucking city, you moron.
I saw the one that went in the lake once a couple years back.
Oh, man.
Guy drove it right in the lake.
Just dumb. Just because you make a lot of dollars doesn't mean you have a lot of sense.
All right, thanks, Grandpa. All right, Boise, Idaho. After 80 years, about 80 years after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, a veteran who died during the attacks has had his remains identified. The remains of William Eugene Blanchard, who was killed at Pearl Harbor while serving on the USS Oklahoma, were identified through DNA testing conducted by the agency within the U.S. Department of Defense, and the Idaho Statesman reported Wednesday. Crazy. It says Blanchard was 24 when he was aboard the warship, which was struck by multiple torpedoes and capsized. In 2015, officials at the Department of Defense approved DNA testing for those buried. Until that, only 6 buried soldiers had been identified, according to the Department of Defense. So, looks like that's crazy how they were able to kind of narrow that down just through genetic testing. And I mean, that's how they caught the Golden State Killer. But still, the fact that, you know, all these unidentified soldiers might actually one day be identified.
Dude,
Good closure for the families too.
It's crazy just to think like how many bodies are just sitting at the bottom of the ocean that are never going to be recovered.
Oh yeah, I mean my great grandfather is one of them. He was on a minesweeper during World War II, and they were sweeping, and he was a cook on the ship, and the ship struck a mine and ended up being, you know, filled with water because of it, and they can't sink it because they're already on a submarine. So,
your great grandfather was in World War II?
Yep, it was my grandmother's father.
Wow, was he like a lot older serving, or was she just had kids super young?
She was born in 1932, so. But yeah, it was her dad, and he was a cook on the ship. So.
God, what a terrible way to go.
I know.
Just already in a floating coffin in the ocean, like nowhere to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were already underwater. It was a submarine, so.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Dude, it's crazy, like, talking about just bodies and remains and stuff that is never going to be recovered. I was, like, looking at this thing on Mount Everest, and I don't know if, like, you've ever actually looked at just, you know, any of the documentaries that talk about people that climb it. Like, it's fairly common not to make it all the way to the top, but like people climb it, you know, like regularly. Like it's like a big tourist thing. Whereas, you know, back in the day, it was always like, don't go there. Only the bravest of the brave go there. But now it's become like, you know, pretty much routine. And they talk about like getting altitude sickness where like there's literally just not enough oxygen for your body. And then as you get to the top, it's essentially killing off your cells. And you get to like a point on the mountain where if you just hang out there too long, like you'll eventually just drop dead without, you know, from not having enough oxygen, even though you're technically there breathing, but it's just, there's not enough oxygen in the air. It's kind of crazy. And I guess like a lot of it has to do with,
well they say like the oxygen molecules are just so far apart that high up in the atmosphere.
Yeah. I don't know the science behind it. So clue me in if you do, because I don't
know.
No,
that's exactly why. It's because when they say the air is thin, it's because there's a less density of oxygen molecules.
Huh. Well, there's the one that I was watching was this, and I don't remember the dude's name, but he was like one of the first dudes to have like an Indian-led team to make it to the top, and they got up like real late. And they were supposed to leave at like 3:30 in the morning to go. They didn't get up until 8 and leave. I don't know how that happens. But by the time I guess they were told, like, if you don't get to this point by 3 p.m., you need to turn around, because then that's when all the stuff we just talked about starts to happen. And then there's a huge chance that you're not going to make it through the night. So they got up there and they weren't really close enough by 3. So the dude that was in charge was like, hey, we need to turn around. And they said they don't know if it was actually him saying, you know, no, we're not going to do it, or if they just didn't hear him. And he tried radioing them to turn around, and they never responded. And then so that dude just turned around and left, went back down because he was already starting to feel it. He was getting weak, all that stuff was starting to set in. And then like an hour later or half an hour later, he gets a call over the radio that says, "Hey, we're going to make a push for the top. We're only about an hour away." So then like an hour after that, he gets another call that says, "Hey, we made it. We're good." And so they did make it to the top, and he was like the first Indian dude to, Indian led thing to do it. And then he actually ended up dying up there. And the thing that's crazy about it is it's so expensive as well as dangerous to retrieve these bodies, so they just leave them up there.
Oh yeah, no,
there's like hundreds of bodies that are like just littered around this mountain, and by the time if you actually get to the top, like you're physically climbing over bodies. And I guess like if the snow, if it's light enough or the snow is thin enough, like you can actually see bodies just littered around this
They're in
mountain.
perfect shape.
Yeah, just preserved. And I guess this dude had like these neon green boots on, and they like nicknamed him Green Boots. And there's like pictures of his body just with these green boots. And he's like, I don't remember if they said he got into a cave, but obviously he ended up succumbing. But he's like kind of laying down, like curled up, just like with his arms wrapped around himself. And he's just frozen like that. And he has been for years.
Yeah, I'm looking here. It says, Green Boots is given to the unidentified body of a climber that became a landmark on the northeast ridge of Mount Everest. And yeah, you can see a photo of Green Boots taken by an Everest climber.
Yeah, dude, that's
Weird.
crazy.
Man. And he's just left up there. Like, I'm surprised nobody goes up there and just kind of tries to bring him back. Are they... I don't know.
Well, can you fly a helicopter up there?
I don't think you necessarily need to fly a helicopter. Couldn't you just put somebody on like a sled and,
But aren't you risking those people's lives to get the other ones out though?
I mean, I guess.
Well, yeah, but you also have to take into consideration it's not like you're going to the top of a hill and sled riding down.
Why not?
It's not just because it's not just a straight like
put the body on a
perfect-
sled.
I know. I'm just saying.
no.
Weekend at Birdie's.
No, you just grab the arms and you pull them back and you ride the body like a toboggan.
Oh boy. Yeah, it says the first recorded footage of Green Boots was filmed on May 21st, 2001 by French climber Pierre Paperon. In the video, Green Boots is shown lying on his left side facing towards the summit. According to Paperon, I don't know how you pronounce this, Sherpas told them that it was the body of a Chinese mountaineer who had attempted the climb 6 months earlier. Over time, the corpse became known as both a landmark on the North Route and for its association with the death of David Sharp. In May 2014, Green Boots' body was reported to be missing from view, presumably removed or buried. It reappeared, however, in 2017. So,
Imagine that. Someone tells you, well, you're going to die and you're going to be known as a landmark. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
A landmark.
There's two possible identities, too. It says Green Boots is commonly believed to be an Indian climber. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this guy's name.
It's like Paj something.
Yeah, it's like Tsewang, Swang Pajor, maybe? Who was wearing green Kolfak boots on the day he and two others...
Can't say that word.
Which one?
Flock.
Flock.
Koflock.
Boots on the day he and two others of his party attempted the summit in 1996. Although it is possible the body may have instead have been that of his team member, I think Dorje Morup. The Everest disaster of 1996 saw the deaths of 8 climbers, which included 5 climbers from the Adventure Consultants and the Mountain Madness expeditions on the southeast side of the route. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of sad. Like you say, your parents, have you. Your mom gives birth to you. They're holding you, and they're like, this person's going to be the president of the United States, or this person's going to cure cancer. No, this person's going to be a landmark.
Yeah. Well, everybody gets to make their own choices.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. This day in history. Not too much happened this day throughout the years. Let's see. The big thing from history.com was it says Triangle Shirtwaist Fire kills 146 in New York City. In one of the darkest moments in American industrial history. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company factory in New York City burns down, killing 146 of its workers on March 25th, 1911. The tragedy led to development of a series of laws and regulations that better protected the safety of factory workers. Other things that happened today, 1634, the settlement of Maryland. The first colonists to Maryland arrive in St. Clements Island on Maryland's western shore and found the settlement of St. Mary's. In 1975, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia was assassinated. 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. leads a march against the Vietnam War. And 1968, quote, wise men advised President Johnson to negotiate peace in Vietnam. After being told by the Secretary of Defense, Clark Clifford, that the Vietnam War is a real loser, President Johnson, still uncertain about his course of action, decides to convene a 9-man panel of retired presidential advisors, the group which became known as the Wise Men. So there you have it. All right. And you guys got any other news stories for today?
Alligator snapping turtle. Look it up. Moving on. It's a fucking snapping turtle that is fucking enormous. They're like 60 pounds, and their fucking head is like, they could like take your arm off.
I'm looking it up. I'm on Wikipedia. This thing looks like a dinosaur.
Dude, it is the gnarly... Dude, it looks like...
It looks like Ninja Turtles.
I was just gonna say, was Taka the turtle, or because Razor was the wolf or the dog, or so it looks like Taka from Ninja Turtles. Secret
at the end of the
Ooze.
movie when it shrunk back down. Yes.
If anybody is familiar with that movie, that's what it looks like, and it also loves donuts.
Oh well, then yes, we found its inspiration. All right, Dan, what do you got for tonight?
Wow. I'm going to go over basically a story that everybody and their brother has known and heard about. It's nothing obscure. It's going to go over the Amityville murders, Amityville horror. Everyone's heard of it. What I wanted to talk about real kind of quick and go over is, everyone talks about the horror, the movie, and the hauntings, I should say, of everything that took place afterward, and the George Lutz, or Lutz, however you pronounce his name, and his wife, what they said occurred in the mid-70s. But it's a two-pronged subject because, you have the murders that took place, which are very real and obviously did happen. And then you have, of course, the hauntings, which some people say it's fake. It was just made up to make money out of the whole thing. Whatever. You can believe what you want on the whole haunting portion of it. Even though some people do say that definitely, those hauntings did happen, not as extreme as the movie. But anyway, going over the murder itself, and this has kind of been brought back in the news because 2 weeks ago, Ronnie DeFeo Jr., the guy that murdered his family, he died in prison. He was obviously serving a life sentence, and he died in prison. So kind of put it back in the spotlight a little bit. But what I wanted to talk about and just get your guys' opinion of it is really how these murders took place. And I know a lot of people have talked about it and try to figure out. This man killed his entire family. He killed both his parents and his 4 siblings. He shot him with a 35 caliber lever action Marlin 336 rifle. Okay, not a quiet gun. This happened around 3 o'clock in the morning. In November. Okay, there was no storms, there were no thunderstorms, nothing like that. No one heard this gunshot from this guy, these gunshots. He shot his parents 2 times each, and he shot his 4 siblings. Okay, that's a lot of shots to go off for nobody to hear. The neighbors that were awake that night, and this is why I want to talk about this, because it boggles my mind how this occurred. no one heard anything. The people were sleeping; they didn't hear it. The neighbors that were awake did not hear anything. All the victims were face down in their beds. Okay, there was no sign of struggle from any of them. The police said there were no signs of any kind of sound suppressor on the gun to bring that back, to bring the sound down. There was no evidence of sedatives being administered to the DeFeo family at all. Administered to the DeFeo family. So how did this happen? And a lot of people will turn around and bring in the haunting portion of it, because Ronnie DeFeo himself, of course, said, first he said a mobster did it. He said there was the family had mob ties, and a mobster came in, and a couple people came in and shot the family, which would make more sense to how so many people could have gotten shot and not left their beds. But that was quickly, squashed by the police. The other thing, of course, was he said voices in the house told him to do it. The old insanity plea, that what an attorney will tell you to go plead insane. You'll get, not get the death penalty, right? But there's a lot of questions about this. The only thing the neighbors heard that night was the dog barking. And it's not like the movie where the house is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was, even though the houses weren't right on top of each other, they were still pretty close together, to where people should have heard a rifle go off, 8 times, 9 times or whatever. And this is something that has just boggled my mind of how this guy got away with doing this, and nobody heard anything. How nobody in the house, it wasn't a 50-room mansion, it was just a standard Dutch colonial. How did no one in that house get up and try to run, get out of there, anything? And that's my story. I think it's a fascinating story, and you wonder, granted, I think there was 6 owners since, since the DeFeos were murdered in it. One of the owners actually died on 9/11, I believe. One of the prior owners obviously died on 9/11, but
in one of the attacks.
Yes, in one of the attacks. Yep. I believe this person was on one of the planes that hit the trade center, one of the trade centers. And the Lutzes, they did not live very long. I mean, I don't think they even made it into they didn't even make it to their 70s. They died, both of them died in their 60s or 50s or 60s. The 2 sons are still alive, and the one son did say that his father dealt with the occult, but that a lot of the stuff did happen. Again, if you want to believe it or not believe it, they could have been doing it for a profit. They only stayed in that house 28 days. And then they bought it, they stayed in it 28 days, and they fled, leaving all their furniture, all their clothes, all that stuff in there. Makes you wonder, even if they were planning this just to say, hey, let's create this great story because this family was murdered in there. It really makes you say, would they have stayed a little bit longer? Would they have stayed a couple months, 3 months, 4 months? They didn't even stay a whole month, and they left out of there. So I think it's a fascinating story. And, I think there's so many unanswered questions about the murders themselves, whether you believe in the haunting portion or not. What's your guys' take on it?
I got to be honest. I never watched anything on it. I never watched the movies. It never really interests me. But then again, I don't know. I'm seeing here. It says his story changed quite a few times. He pled not guilty. But he also said that his sister Dawn killed his father, and that his mother was the one who murdered the other siblings. So,
right. Which again, that brings us still back to why did nobody in the neighborhood hear gunshots? And they said that the sister that he claimed did it, she died in the bed. She didn't get shot somewhere else. She died in that bed. So. Unless she laid down and he shot her there, but after she murdered. But I mean, it's still, he did change his story numerous times, and that's what. But I think it's still, there's too many questions that are unanswered about it. And even though he probably did it, but why did no one hear that? Why did nobody in that neighborhood hear that many shots going off from a rifle?
Well, it's a pretty affluent neighborhood, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a very affluent neighborhood.
So-
Yeah, absolutely. It's
So people
definitely.
heard it, but they just don't want to talk about it. That's what it is.
Yeah, well, everybody in the entire neighborhood doesn't want to talk about it. Not one person would admit that they heard gunshot. I find that
Man.
hard to believe.
Okay, well, wasn't at the time that area somewhat dominated by the mob though?
I never heard that. I mean, I never heard that area was dominated by the mob. I mean, obviously New York City had, the mob scene going on in it, but
So
I
just
don't know about that particular area.
hypothetically, how do you know that it wasn't a mob hit and they literally just came by and they were like, you didn't fucking hear anything, and everybody went, oh, I guess I didn't hear anything.
Well,
I mean, let's just take into consideration the general population are fucking pussies. And if you just even get a little scary, people are going to fucking cower and do whatever the fuck you say, because they're going to be like, oh my God, don't hurt me. I'm a fucking giant vagina. Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like it wouldn't really be that hard, especially in an affluent area like that where, I don't know. What year did this happen?
74.
Okay, so definitely in the throat, like the mob was definitely still
Sure.
very strong.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
You know.
absolutely.
There you go again with the 70s.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could be right. I mean, that would take them. They would have to go door to door and tell every single person you didn't hear anything, in that time frame. But it could happen. I mean, it could have been, or a letter could have went out to them, or somebody could have left. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It makes sense because it makes sense that there had to be more people.
The other thing too is that if it really was connected, and people knew that there was a connected murder, then they're not going to say anything because they don't want to be on the wrong end of that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
kind of what I was getting at. Like, they're afraid.
Right. But, and it's anyone that knows, I mean, that's read. My mom used to read a lot of mob books, having Sicilian in us, we was more interested in the mob. One thing that I've always been told, and could, be wrong or right, that the mob will, if they want to kill you, they're going to do what they can to kill you. They're not going to kill innocent kids in beds. That's just not the way the mob really worked.
Yeah. For the most part, it was just guys, not women and children.
Right.
Yeah, but you also got to understand that the mob might have rules, but they're people, and maybe the higher ups and even the guys that are more like, I'm not talking just made guys, but guys that are more like officially part of it have standards. But if you just get some fucking rando hitman, you don't know what the fuck he does.
Yeah.
How do you know one of those hitman wasn't a serial killer anyway?
Right.
I mean, how many times has something like that come out?
In the Iceman book, though, they talk about DeMeo, who Kuklinski worked for. He killed a lot of people too, and he killed a police officer's wife. So it's not necessarily just that was like the golden rule of the mafia. Like, I think, yeah, you're right. If they're crazy to begin with, they're gonna do whatever they want anyway.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I would say the only thing is we could say, which this shit did happen a lot back in the day, was the police force would have to be paid off because they came straight out and said there was absolutely no evidence that anybody else was in that house. But with that being said, people can be corrupted and paid off. So,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, dude,
Yeah.
but I mean, you're talking about the fucking NYPD, right?
no, it's long.
No, this is
Shit. I'm sorry. What was the name of that?
Amityville, New York.
Suffolk. Suffolk. Thank you. Suffolk County Police Department. Yeah, I can't say
Okay,
it.
so
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, dude, the corruption stories of the NYPD are just abundantly just overwhelming. I mean, if you guys get a chance, watch that documentary about Michael Dowd. I mean, dude, totally going off topic here, but that shit was crazy. So this dude was like a cop for the NYPD and running protection for a drug dealer and selling shit and then doing shit. And then he would like he would like get a call and then go there. And if it was like a druggie's house, like the one time he said he walked in on, I don't remember if it was a robbery or a murder or what. And there was just a duffel bag full of money. And he says to the detective that's already there, and he's like, man, don't worry about it. You don't want to do all that paperwork. And the dude's like, yeah, you're right. And he's like, I'll take care of it. And then he leaves and calls his buddy and says, you got to go to this house and rob this house because there's a duffel bag full of money here. Like, they used to do shit like that. This dude is on a cop's salary, buys like a brand new Corvette, just super brazen. And yeah, just ridiculous.
What was this
and
on?
I don't remember if it was YouTube or if it was Netflix.
Well, either way, what was the name? Do you remember the name of it?
I don't remember the name of it, but just type in like Mike Dowd documentary or let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they answer the question where Amityville, I just looked it up. It's actually pretty close to Long Island, so it's not too far from New York City, but it's a little ways from New York City. But yeah, it's in the general.
I stayed in Long Island City once, which was right over the Queensboro Bridge. Fantastic view of the city. This hotel we stayed at, but yeah, I mean, 5-minute ride into the city. Could also be an hour depending on the traffic too. So,
right.
All right, Buddha, what do you got for it? Oh, sorry.
I think it was the 7.5.
Gotcha.
Something like that. But yes, if you get a chance, watch that. Super interesting.
So what do you got for tonight?
All right, John, this is one that you actually may have heard of, but I'm not 100% sure.
Go on.
Go on. You ever heard of Bill Vail? He was on like Coast to Coast and stuff. He was like a NASA engineer at one time, worked in the aerospace robotics, and he was like this super just by the book dude, didn't really get out there with any type of like, I don't know the best way to explain it. Like, he didn't stray from, I guess, like the scientific mind. Wasn't very imaginative, wasn't into paranormal, wasn't into supernatural. Like, everything happens for a reason. He can prove it. He was like one of those dudes, just a textbook dude. And so he gets this job, just to kind of give his background, I guess, to show that he's like a smart guy, had a good job, and just to, show that he's very intelligent. So, like I said, fucking awful at telling stories. Here we go again.
Get on with it.
I know. All right, so
there was this guy who did this thing.
Yeah, this guy did this thing, and it was crazy.
Good story.
So Bill Vail was a dude that worked for NASA. He worked, like I said, the aerospace and robotics engineer. He ends up getting divorced from his wife, and he decides he wants to move back home to like his hometown. So he moves back home, and he ends up getting a job at a water treatment facility, which was like, I don't know if his brother, I think it was his brother's company. It was like a water filtration company. They would just like sell household filters and stuff like that. So one day they're getting ready. It's like the end of the day. They're wrapping up, and they get a call, and he's supposed to have an appointment that he's going to go, like, just to go meet with a customer. And Bill says, you know what? I'm the new guy. I'm going to go ahead and take this. You guys don't worry about it. So for whatever reason, he thought it was kind of odd, because when the customer called, they said, show up at, exactly this time. Like, say it was 5 o'clock. They're like, not a minute early, not a minute late. Just show up at exactly this time. So Bill pulls up, gets his gear ready, and he's walking to the door, and he's like hearing this screaming, which he thought was kind of odd. But he goes to the door anyway and realizes that he knocks and realizes the door is open. So he still hears a noise, and he decides to just, I'm going to open the door. I'm going to go in and check it out. So he walks in the house, and as he walks in, there's like this woman who is essentially, I guess you could say, chanting or leading some type of, I can't say like seance or what the fuck is the word I'm trying to say? Basically, she's performing something, but he doesn't know what it is, and he sees that this is all just kind of weird. So as this is going on, she's like essentially like yelling at these people or yelling to these people like that something needs to get out of them. And he's just like freaking out for a minute. And as he's getting ready to leave, he looks up and he sees her and she looks at him and he just fucking takes off. He books it. So then he calls the office and he's like, all this crazy shit just happened. You know, I don't know what the hell that was. I was there. This is what it was. If this lady calls back, do not send me out there. This is just too weird for me. So he goes home and he decides, you know, I'm just going to kind of chill and relax. So he goes home and he's just like hanging out. He's watching TV and he sees like something just kind of blur out of the corner of his eye. And he just goes, you know, whatever. I'm just seeing shadows. It is, you know, it's not a big deal. So goes on the rest of the night, doesn't notice anything. So then he lays in, you know, he's getting ready to go to bed and he's laying in bed and he's like trying to sleep. And he feels something like brush across his foot. But like I said, he lives alone. You know, he doesn't have any pets. It's just him. So he's kind of like, man, like, am I just freaking out or is something actually happening? So, you know, he gets up, he takes a look out because he's like, maybe a bird got in the house or something when I had the door open. You know, doesn't find anything and just says, okay, I'm probably just tired. I'm going to go back to bed. So he goes to bed and he's like middle of the night and he's like awakened by his bed, which is just like shaking violently. And he has no idea what's going on. You know, this is like, he doesn't know if there's an earthquake. He doesn't know if anything like what would be causing this. But he's, you know, he just kind of sits down and he goes, you know what, this is like, there has to be a rational reason as to why this stuff is happening. So he starts thinking like, okay, well, you know, I'm kind of by the airport. You know, it's possible one of the planes was landing, whatever it is. He's trying to rationalize whatever is happening. So, you know, time stretches on, whatever. He decides to look up on the internet, like if there's any potential things that could have caused this, or if this is like any known area for any type of seismic activity. So he's on the internet and his internet dies, which is, you know, whatever, not a big deal. So he stops researching and it just kind of lets it go. So then his internet still isn't working. He decides to call the service provider. He calls his internet, and while he's on the phone, like there's like static. And then a demonic voice comes over the phone line and he's like trying to talk to the guy, but he can't hear him. And the guy on the other side of the line can't hear him. And he just hears like this crazy voice, doesn't know what it is. It's very brief, you know, a couple seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and then it goes away. And then the guy comes back on and, like the connection is like totally fine. Like nothing ever happened. So he asked the guy, like, you know, what the hell was that? And the guy's like, I have no idea. Like, I was trying to talk to you and obviously you couldn't hear me. And then I heard this voice. So they both heard the voice and it was kind of just like, okay, that was really fucking weird, but you know, whatever. Maybe the lines just got crossed or there was just some kind of interference. So he lets it go. So the next couple nights go by, nothing really happens. And then he sits down with dinner and he's getting ready to eat, and then he said, like, as he's sitting at the table, a bottle of water that he'd set just on the table by him just like flies past his face. His lights go out, and at this point he's just like kind of freaking out. So he goes to get a flashlight, goes in the closet, and it says while he's in the closet, like one of the boxes that's on the top shelf is just picked up and slammed. And it's just like this big boom. So he's like, you know, fucking freaking out, has no rational reason for any of this stuff happening, doesn't really know what's going on. Checks around his house, same thing. Like there's just no evidence of anything. It's just all these kind of strange happenings. So he goes to bed later on. He starts hearing noises from under his bed. And at this point, he's like, all right, something else is happening here. So he doesn't want to admit that like it's potentially something paranormal, but at the same time, he's like, there's no way it can be. He's just kind of like at that point where he needs someone else to rationalize with him. So he calls his brother and he just says, hey, he doesn't want to tell him what it is because his brother's going to think it's crazy. So he calls his brother just to come by and he's like, I want you to look at something in the closet. So his brother's like, okay, like that's fucking weird, but whatever. So his brother comes by and, sorry, this is where I get fucked up. So his brother comes by and he's like, all right, I want you to just go stand in the closet. And he's like, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. So he goes in the closet, nothing happens. And he's like, no, just stay in there and wait for a little bit. So his brother's just like hanging out in the closet and something like in the closet falls and hits his leg. And then something else falls and hits him in the face. And Bob's like, okay, well, something fell out of your closet and hit me. Not that big of a deal. Like you probably just need to clean your shit up. So he's like so Bill's kind of frustrated at this point because he's like, man, I know like that's not normal. Something else is happening here. So he decides to call one of his old friends. His name's Michael Higdon. And Michael was actually a sound engineer. And he says, man, like this is the stuff that's happening. Kind of like, what should I do? I'm hearing these noises, blah, blah, blah. While he's on the phone with Michael, that static happens again. And there's a bunch of noise. And that voice comes back and he's starting, he's hearing it and he's like yelling to Michael, like, don't listen to the voice, can you hear me? Blah, blah, blah. And that goes on for, 30 seconds or a minute or so. But while this is happening, Michael can hear the voice too. He grabs a recorder that's by it and puts it by the phone. So then once the noise goes away, static goes away, the voice goes away, they're talking to one another and he's like, did you hear that? And he's like, I don't know what that is. This is the second time this has happened to me. He said they both said, yeah, I heard it. And Michael's like, I recorded it. So he goes to play it back. And when he plays it back, the only thing on there is Bill's voice telling Michael to hang up. Like the static, the disturbance, and the demonic voice are just nowhere on the recording. And he's like, all right, that's super fucking weird. So then Bill's like, okay, I'm going to have my brother and sister come over. We're just going to hang out. I'm just kind of sick of being alone. But at the same time, I want other people here because if some crazy shit happens, I want someone else to witness, just to basically solidify the fact that I'm not crazy. So they're sitting down, they're watching a movie, they ate dinner, and Bill's just sitting in his chair and he sees out of the corner of his eye, like a small figure just run across the room. So he's like, all right, hang on. Did you guys see that? And they're like, no, what are you talking about? And he's like, Bob, sit in my chair and everybody just keep doing what you were doing. Don't pay any attention to anything specifically. Just hang out how we were. So they do that. And Bob goes, holy shit, I saw it. So he sees a figure run across the room. So he's like, okay, yes, there's definitely something going on here. So then he gets up and he says, all right, Cindy, just sit down. And so she does it. Same thing. She ends up seeing something too, but it's always out of the corner of her eye. So at this point, they're like, okay, you got something in your house. So the three of them look, all over the house. They can't find anything. So they're just kind of like, I don't know what it is. We all saw it. So there is something here, whether it's an animal that got in or it is possibly something paranormal. I don't know. So Bill goes, okay, well, we've pretty much exhausted all the realm of possibilities of this being something that is considered normal. So he basically goes, okay, contacts a team of paranormal investigators to come in the house and just kind of, just do what they do. So the first thing the team does when they come in is they just check around to see if there's any potential natural causes that could have happened. And they don't find anything. So they're like, okay, we're going to set up some cameras. We're going to set up, recorders, just the usual stuff. So what they do in one of the rooms is they set up laser grids. So basically what that does is there's lasers that are projected all over the room. And if anything moves, it'll break the beam. So you'll see the laser break. And they have a recording set up with this and then a video recorder as well. So after about an hour, one of the guys from the paranormal team goes in the room just to do an EVP session. And as he's about to get up and leave, one of the lasers just moves on its own. So they leave, they grab the cameras, and they go over the footage. And there's actually a video of this. You can see there's like a mist that starts to gather in that room. And he said when he was in the room, he didn't see anything, but on camera, you start to see a mist, and then you see the laser get kicked. You know, it moves, so the beam gets broken. And as they're recording or reviewing the audio as this happens, they make out the phrase, "Put it back, he's coming," and then the laser hits the floor. So like I said, there is a video of that. And basically at this point, they're like, all right, you know, you got something in this house. We don't know what it is. I would suggest that you leave because whatever it is definitely demonic. So as they're packing up their stuff, you know, they're just like, Bill, you need to get out. And he's like, nope, this is my house. Enough is enough. I'm staying. And I'm just going to have to deal with this on my own. So they said the night that he leaves, he's sitting in his bedroom and he feels just this huge boom, like something just ran into the house. So he runs outside and there's nothing. He thought maybe like a car had hit the house or something like that. Nothing. Goes around the house, goes around the whole yard, doesn't see anything. He's like, okay, it's fucking weird. So he comes back inside and now he's starting to hear like these crashing noises, but they're in the house. They're like all throughout his house. Bill's car alarm ends up going off and he's just like at wit's end at this point, and he's basically just walking around his house screaming, you know, just like, this is my house, like what the fuck. And he's like moving frantically all over the house because he's trying to chase like the sound of all these crashes and everything that's going around. And he said, sorry, he ends up chasing, you know, up and down the stairs all over the place, and it just gets so chaotic. And he calls the guy from the paranormal team one more time, and his name was Brian. And they said when Brian picked up the phone, all he could hear was the static, you know, the noise, and then the demonic voice. And then Bill said in his bedroom, he ends up seeing like a creature just standing at the foot of his bed, and it's essentially just a black shadow, you know, just big, 6 foot tall or so. And it's just coming closer and closer to Bill as he's just laying on his bed. And he said, like, by the time it gets close enough for him to scream, it just disappears. And then back to the noises again. You know, now it's a violent rattling at the door drew him downstairs. He's just shaking, trying to open the door. And he's just basically freaking out at this point, but there's never any, like, no solid idea as to what it is. So he's just living with this, dealing with his noises and the shaking and the shadows and all this stuff in his house. So he just kind of delves back into the research, and pretty much he just kind of comes to the realization that, okay, this is a demon. And when I was called to do that appointment for that customer, the reason that they wanted me there at that specific time is because that woman was performing an exorcism and they needed someone for the demon to latch onto. So when they exorcised the demon, he walked in and it basically latched onto him, and then he brought it home. And yeah, that's the only thing that he can come up with. And he still lives in the house. He is still, you know, just researching it because I don't know how you can ever prove like a solid answer. But this is a guy that was, you know, a very black and white, you know, this is this because this is what exists. Didn't believe in ghosts, you know, didn't believe in spirits. And now literally saying like, yep, I walked in on an exorcism and took the demon home with me.
Yeah. Wow. There's another interesting story similar to this. And it's funny, like how you mentioned that things get attached to people. This one's more of like a thing. There's a episode of Unsolved Mysteries that did I don't know what you call it, like a segment, I guess, on they call it the Tallman's Ghost, and this family, last name Tallman, from Wisconsin, bought a set of bunk beds, and they brought these bunk beds home, and they bought them. I'm just going to read some notes here from a news article. This is from 1988. But it says the problems began 6 months ago when the Tallmans brought a second hand of bunk beds home for $100. They actually ended up getting buried in a landfill, but the beds were, let's see here. Tallman said frightening things occurred after the arrival of the bunk beds in the shared room of their 2 girls, ages 1 and 2, such as a foggy apparition that appeared to and threatened them, saying, "You're dead." The Tallmans bought a low-interest farmer's home on an administration loan. It says also here, too, that, every website I go to nowadays, it's riddled with ads. And then the page just shifts as I'm trying to read. It drives me freaking crazy. Also, a ghost of an old woman appeared to them, or to the son. A clock radio kept changing stations by itself, and a chair and suitcase moved by themselves. Tallman said around Christmas time, after challenging the entity to leave his family alone, he saw flames coming from the overhead door of his garage. A voice that said, "Come here," and 2 eyes appeared in the windows of the garage door. He said he looked again and there was no fire. In early January, a gassy apparition rose out of the floor of the girl's bedroom while Tallman was waiting for the younger child to fall asleep. He said the apparition told him, "You're dead," and then it was gone. The family then just got rid of the bunk beds and were buried in a garbage dump. But I mean, imagine that, you bring something home for your kids, you're trying to do the right thing, and then all of a sudden all this crazy stuff happens.
This is actually the perfect time for me to bring this up because Natalie was talking to me about this yesterday. She had like this doll that she got from her grandma, and it wasn't like an antique or anything like that, but it was like, I think it was like either one of those magazine ordered or like Home Shopping Network ordered type things, or it wasn't like anything, that was passed down from generations. But she said like she always had just the weirdest feeling being at home. This obviously when she lived at home, like just being at home in her bedroom alone. And I'm pretty sure she had told me like she was laying in bed one time and she felt like something touch her hair, or it was something like that. And she said she never had any issues or feelings or anything like that until she got this doll. And then after that, she got rid of it. And then there was, that whole feeling was gone. Now that also could be because Natalie is extremely dramatic and she just psyched herself out because that for whatever reason, she psyched herself out. Or, maybe it was just some creepy ass handmade doll that QVC was selling.
Yeah, which a lot of them are creepy looking, especially the older ones.
People?
Right.
I was going to ask you this too, because I might have missed it when you were telling the story. There was some static on your end, and I did hear a demonic voice talking, but I didn't hear what you said about what appointment did they go to? I missed that part.
It was in the.
What did he work for?
He worked for the water treatment. So it wasn't like a water treatment, but it was like a home water treatment, water filtration company. It was an appointment, like a consultation to go meet a customer and basically figure out like what they need or what they wanted to do.
Gotcha.
So like, how like Culligan's will do like water filtration for your home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like that kind of thing. So he was just going to meet a customer, find out what they needed, and that's why they said it was so specific that they said, get here exactly at this time. Cause it's like she set it up knowing this ritual is going to be over at this time. So I need someone here. That's why she said, don't come early, don't come late.
I was going to say that guy has a very large set of balls to stay in a house after all that shit's happening, but
things dragging on the ground.
Yeah, man. I mean, really. So, I mean, the question is, though,
if he's a man of science, this kind of thing doesn't make sense to him. So there's got to be some sort of explanation to it, and it can't just be. Yeah, and it can't just be metaphysic.
Well, I understand that, but when a creature that's 6 foot tall is in front of you, at that point, when do you go, okay, to hell with science? This is crazy. I'm getting the hell out of this. That's what I was going to say, Buddha. If he left the house, it wouldn't have mattered, right? This thing was latched onto him.
Well,
it would have followed him anywhere.
Because he never left the house, so no one would know. But yeah, you would think If he brought it to his house, then it would have been latched onto him, not the house, because he'd already been living there. It didn't happen until that stuff happened by going to the customer's house.
Well, yeah, and there's been also stories where people have moved from place to place, and they take the haunting with them, and then somebody will move into a house after the people that had claimed it was haunted moved out, and they're like, no, nothing ever happened here, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Natalie said, she also said, I also only experienced sleep paralysis when that doll was in the room. So another question being,
You sure that
do
doll
you
wasn't
believe
you?
it? Yeah, this was before I was around.
Yeah. No, I love stuff like this. I'm always going to take the side of that again, truth is stranger than fiction to me. So I'm in.
How old was Natalie how old was she when she had the doll?
She was probably like a teenager. I don't know. I'm sure she'll respond in a second. But what do you think, Dan? Do you believe it?
You mean Natalie's situation?
No, the
Or
fucking story I just told. Jesus Christ.
Oh, the story. Well, we're talking about two different things, asshole.
No, we're not. Do you
We're
believe
talking
the
about
story that
Natalie's
I
doll,
just
and we're
read?
talking about the other thing. No, I don't know, man. I can't believe somebody.
Wait a minute.
All
The first
that
question is, did it happen in the 70s?
No, it did not.
Then it's
Then
not true.
I don't have a response. So no,
There is no time after the 70s.
that's right. I guess my thing is
Gonna
this.
call Jim Rockford to get on the case.
Oh man, that's my hero. That is my hero. That's my dude right there, man. But no, I guess my thing is that is an incredible amount of things that have happened. I understand he's a man of science and he wants to get right down to the bottom of it, but the truth of it. But I don't know, man. That much stuff happening in that short a time, from what that's being described, it's hard to believe that anybody, especially alone, would just not go crazy and just leave the house, try to go stay at a hotel, take some other steps. If he took other steps and it kept happening in other places, whatever. But to stay in the house where it's all happening, man, it's hard to. Like I said, the guy must have like you said, dragging his balls on the ground. He must have such big balls, because I don't care how much of a man you are. Like you said, Buddha, everyone's a pussy. How many people would stay around a house or stay around an area that's all that stuff is happening? That is an incredible amount of freakish things happening at one time.
I guess the other thing, though, is what I know that there were other people there at times to corroborate what happened, but two things to say to that. One of them, what if he had psyched himself out so much he was actually hallucinating?
Possible.
Or like a potential mental something, like disorder or illness or anything that could potentially have happened. Or also, because there were people there to corroborate it, you guys have heard of, oh shit, what is that called when, like, it's like group, fuck. Basically, like, what
Go
I'm trying
on.
to say? No, I can't get the fucking word out, but it's like group hysteria, like mass hysteria,
Yeah.
where everyone just believes it so much because they're being told to believe it, or they're being told that it's it.
Mandela
Yeah, well, I
effect?
mean, not so much that, but it's mass hysteria. is what it is. Yeah, yes. No. No, but I mean, that's generally where, like, there will be a large group of people and everybody will experience, like, the same thing, even though it never really happened. It's just that, like, the atmosphere and everything and the moods of everyone has set it so that they believe that it happened, but it never actually did. So what if this dude was, like, so animated and so amped up, because he's never like that? He's like a very monotone, cut and dry guy, but seeing him so amped, yeah, just like me, just fucking deadpan. But, the idea of seeing that guy so amped up about something made you go, shit, maybe this really is real. And then you start freaking yourself out, and then you start to see shit. Like, what if it was corroborated that way? I don't know. But like I said, there's also the video of, the laser being moved. But that being said, it is a video. I'm not in the room. That shit could always be faked. Same with the
Right.
audio. Like I never buy into that stuff because it can, especially in today's day and age. I mean, you can
Right.
do editing on a fucking home computer now that, back in the day was just not unreachable. You couldn't even do it.
Right. Hollywood was the only one that could do it.
And not even then, like, 20 years ago, you couldn't even do the editing you can do on a home computer now.
Well, right, absolutely. Hell, you can practically do most of that on your phone. Some of
Yeah.
it. I don't know.
All right. Well, and how is this still going on or no? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like,
I think it said like '02. I think that happened in '02.
Wow.
'02
All right,
or
that's-
'04 or something like that.
See, that's what throws me for it. This guy, I mean, how many people would have just lost it and jumped off a bridge if this stuff is still going on in his house? He's putting up with it for almost 20 years now.
Yeah, but it's also like, it's not like it's happening every single day, every minute of every day. Like even all the stuff I just explained to you wasn't like it was like in 3 days. It was over a period of time. So who knows? I mean, I guess it's kind of one of those things. Like if you have a bad experience with something at your house, like whatever it is, I don't know, you're going to be cautious. You're going to be a little excitable. You're going to be nervous. And then it's going to slowly die off and you're going to go, all right, it's not that bad. Maybe I was overreacting a
used to
little
it.
bit. And then it pops up again, but it doesn't continue to happen. So then you just rinse and repeat the same cycle. Like maybe it's something like that that's happening.
Yeah.
Or maybe
That's
there's nothing happening at all.
It's a weird story for sure. I mean, it's definitely weird.
all right. We're gonna pivot out of that and into. Have you guys ever heard the story of Dulce and Philip Schneider?
No.
I'm not.
All right, so let me get into what Dulce is, and have either of you heard of what Dulce is?
I don't believe
Nope.
so.
Okay, so Dulce is the subject of a conspiracy theory, and this is coming from Wikipedia, so buckle up. Is claiming that a jointly operated human and alien underground facility exists under Alqueda, I don't know how to pronounce this right, and Mesa on the Colorado-New Mexico border near the town of Dulce, New Mexico, in the United States. Claims of alien activity first arose from Albuquerque businessman Paul Benowitz. So basically what they're saying is that there's a underground base, on the border of New Mexico and Colorado that holds both alien and humankind, or humanity, or however you want to put it. Anyway, the real meat and potatoes of this is basically that a guy named Philip Schneider, went down there in 1979. So Dan, right up your alley, just made it.
Yes, absolutely.
Basically, there was a battle between gray aliens and humans that left 60 humans dead, and an untold number of gray aliens wounded. Let's see here. They sent down the Green Berets to fight these aliens. Basically, what was happening was that Schneider says that in the base, aliens were conducting experiments on humans, and he said that the deep underground graves would absorb human and cow blood for sustenance. In 1990, he came out with the story basically stating that, let's see here, he came out with the story of the alleged underground fight. He said, sorry, this page keeps shifting on me. It says, at the time, the engineer had began construction on the underground base, just like he would any other base, by drilling the holes. This time, however, an arcid smell like burning garbage emerged from the drilled holes. That's when the fighting started. Then one day, he turned around and came face to face with what he called a 7-foot tall, stinky gray alien. Immediately, the engineer grabbed his pistol and took 2 of them down. A third one blew some of his fingers off with some kind of a laser blaster. That's when one of the Green Berets sacrificed himself to save Schneider's life. The scuffle turned into a full-blown battle that killed 60 humans. Green Berets reacted instantly, bringing all the firepower they could bear on the aliens. The aliens responded by shooting blue bolts of radiant power with movements of their hands. The kind of bolts that blew Schneider's fingers were turning the Special Forces soldiers inside out. Eventually, the aliens relented, retreating deeper into the complex. What happened in the years to follow is anyone's guess. Also, after Schneider came out with these stories, in 1990, 2 years later, it's believed that he killed himself with a catheter cord, although some people are saying that there was foul play and that he had made a statement that if he was ever found dead, it was not by his own doing. So just an interesting story here. There's a couple of YouTube videos of his seminar out there talking about this fight that occurred between the gray aliens and the humans. But, frightening to think that, okay, what if they're not, from the sky, but from underneath, and they're living within the earth and we never even knew about it?
Interesting thought, for sure. Because everyone thinks that they're out in space.
Scuffling with a fucking alien.
Well, yeah, I mean, that and they're radiating energy, and it, like I said, it turned people inside out. So,
who was that guard that said he used to work in Roswell, and they would talk about like how Roswell is actually like a decoy, and like the real base is some other place, but they just use Roswell and keep it super classified.
Well, Lazar said that aside from just Area 51 was the Army base, S4 was the Navy base out in the salt bed, or the dry lake, the dry lake beds out.
But he was a scientist, wasn't he?
Lazar?
Yeah.
Yeah, physicist.
Yeah, he was the one that they took him totally off the roster, said he never worked there, and like had.
Well, the story goes is that he worked for JPL, and then JPL said that he had never worked there, but and then also, or kind of the MIT erased his credibility. But then a phone list emerged from JPL that he actually did work there. And so, did you watch that documentary on Netflix about him?
No.
Man, it's good because Jeremy Corbell, he found a bunch of he found this photo, and so for years Lazar's like, okay, to get in the base, they had a hand scanner, and it came to 5 points, and you put your hand in it, and nobody believed him. And then Jeremy found this picture of him. He's like, this is exactly what I was talking about. All the stuff that Lazar talked about for years, 30 years ago, is starting to show, over time, has shown to be actually true. And so, Lazar, I don't think he's ever saw an alien per se, but, he's read, he had briefings about the creatures that had these crafts, and, the seating was built for someone 3 foot tall versus 5-6 foot tall. Yeah. So, and he, like I said, he worked in S4, not Area 51.
Okay. Well, there was one, I don't remember the dude's name, but he's he said he was a security guard. I guess he would be an MP probably.
Yeah.
Well, whoever he was, but he was a guard at Area 51, and he had talked about seeing, I don't know, there's 12 different kinds of aliens that are already among us, or 7, or don't quote me on the number. And then some of them, the human mind can't even comprehend seeing it. So some people would see it and they would just have a heart attack, instantly. It was just shock to their body. And I can't remember his name for the life of me, who that dude was, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just seems totally weird to me to not think that there's the possibility of other life forms out there other than humans. How fucking just, I don't know.
What's the funny thing about this too is if there is, and I'm on the fence of it myself, believing it or not, but if there truly was, in the government, we always talk about the government knowing about it. The government would never tell anyone about it. And, and of course, you always say that, well, of course, because there would be mass panic. But if the beginning of the pandemic was any indication of how people react with being, told this is happening, and watch how people acted with toilet paper and acting like lunatics, running into stores. Can you imagine if the government came out and said, well, we want to just tell everyone there are aliens, we've seen them. There is the potential that they can blow up the entire planet. We do know this for a fact. Can you imagine what would happen to the majority of people if they heard news like that?
All right,
well,
so
dude, half the countries right now with the amount of nukes could blow up the entire planet.
Right, but it's still different. Go ahead, John.
So, Dan, this kind of takes me back to back in the day on Art Bell. John Lear did an episode with them where he basically read like a faux briefing and said, okay, how would you react if the government sat you down and said these exact things? And I'll read the briefing to you here because I think it's an interesting take on things. So it says, so here's the deal. We'll use some videos and stills. Our first UFO recoveries were in the late 30s. We made a couple in the beginning of the 40s, and then came Roswell, which the public found out about. We got 2 live aliens from Roswell. One died shortly thereafter, and one lived till 1956. And we found out so far that there are 18 different alien species that we know about monitoring Earth. Some are good, and some are hostile. Most are indifferent. We found out that we are an experimental product, if you will, of an alien race who we never met, and we don't know who they are. All we know is that the Greys are cybernetic organisms, glorified robots, if you will, who work here at the behest of their employers, monitoring us through abductions. We were never able to find out what the experiment is all about, except that we have been externally corrected about 65 times, and they, the aliens, refer to us as containers. There's been speculation that their souls our bodies contain are the reason for the experiments, but nothing has been proven or determined. Since 1938, we've lost over 200 aircraft due to UFO hostilities and thousands of soldiers in all kinds of different actions with aliens. Since that time, several 100,000 civilians have disappeared with no trace. Several thousand of those were eliminated by us because of their chance encounters with the aliens, which could ill afford to have been publicized. A slightly more frightening phenomenon known as human mutilations have occurred on a regular basis and similar to cattle mutilations, in that the human or humans are taken from the street, so to speak, and returned to the same area 45 minutes to an hour later with their rectums cored out, their genitals removed, and their eyes removed from their sockets and completely drained of their blood. In all cases, it appeared to be mutilation procedures occurred while the persons were still alive and conscious. Our scientist speculates that apparently the human specimens had to be alive for the samples to be worth anything. Abductions occur on a daily basis throughout the United States to at least 10% of the population. When we first were made aware of this, we protested to the little gray being we had in captivity at the YY2 facility in Los Alamos, but a deal was struck that in exchange for advanced technology from the aliens, we would allow them to abduct a small number of persons, and we would periodically be given a list of those persons abducted. We got something less than the technology we bargained for and found out the abductions exceeded by a millionfold than what they had naively agreed to. In 1954, President Eisenhower met with a representative of another alien species at the Muroc Test Center, which is now called Edwards Air Force Base. This alien suggested that they could help us get rid of the Greys, but Eisenhower turned down their offer because they offered no technology. Oh, it's long. At this point, it became apparent to all involved that there was no such thing as a God, at least to the public, as how the public perceives God. Certainly some form of computer recorder stores information, and an occasional miracle is displayed by the aliens to influence a religious event. This so unnerved Eisenhower that he had In God We Trust put on the paper money and coins put in the Pledge of Allegiance to reaffirm the public belief in God. Shortly after, it was determined in meetings between the U.S. and the Russians that the situation was serious enough that a Cold War should be manufactured as a ruse to divert attention of the public away from UFOs towards some other scary threat like the H-bomb. It was also decided to keep the ruse secret from any elected or appointed officials within both the U.S. and Russian governments, as it took so long to vet those officials, and the ruse was easier to manage if the top people didn't know about it. In the late 1950s, NASA was formed to compartmentalize, containerize, and sanitize the information from all space platforms and vehicles. We sold NASA to the public, claiming that all information would belong to them, but they got very little, and even that was highly sanitized. Our first efforts were to keep the public from learning about Venus, a very similar planet to Earth, and its population is very similar to us, and just as technologically advanced. We have learned a lot from them, stating that the Russian Venera 1 and the U.S. Mariner 2, we made Venus look like a lead-melting volcanic surface spewing sulfuric acid into a pressurized atmosphere 90 times that of Earth. And that was often the case. We overdid it and wondered why nobody asked how a parachute survived in a descent in 800-degree air. We set up operations in Pine Gap, Australia, to preclude any prying eyes from figuring out what we were up to there. We regularly eliminated through extreme prejudice anybody who was part of the operation, and made the least tiny threat about disclosure or dissatisfaction with the operation. Any space mission that included Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Mariner, Voyager, Clementine, and all the rest, all data came in transmitted to Pine Gap, then it was relayed to JPL or wherever after sanitizing. We had a little trouble with amateur radio operators, but we figured out how they could intercept these signals, but we managed to deal with that. Whew, a little more. When the Russians' threat began to fade...
It's so long.
Yeah, I know. Well, you should have heard you talk, dude. All right. When the Russian threat began to fade, we introduced Vietnam, which kept the public record occupied for over 10 years. The cover-up and personnel to run the operation began to get bigger and bigger. We required more and more money. We were forced to inflate the budget, or to inflate the defense budget, which soon was not enough. Then we got into the drug business, and that was still not enough. We were the ones that looted the savings and loan industry and Wall Street to boot. It is so out of control. Now most people want immunity and want out. But there's so much secrecy and so many double and triple blinds in place that it's unlikely that this thing can ever be dismantled. And if you give us the go-ahead to spill the beans to the public, it's unlikely they will get anything more than a yes, we recovered a flying saucer, and yes, there was an occupant, but that's all we're going to tell you. All right, so here in the first video, what you see is what the human mutilations look like. That one was a male, about 27 years old. That one is a film of dead aliens being pulled from the wreckage of the aircraft in Elkanah, California in the 50s. That craft you see over there was over 250 feet in diameter and had to be buried on the spot. It says the site is in Utah near Dugway Proving Grounds. The object you're looking now is at the Kecksburg Acorn, which was brought to you right pat in the middle 1960s. There's Frank Drake trying to force information out of a being tied down in a stretcher. He was supposedly from Tau Ceti. And so again, he's saying that if they were to do this briefing, it says here are 5-second slides of the 18 different species we're looking at. That one there is the most gruesome looking. The guards at one facility are carefully indoctrinated over several months, being shown pictures similar to but not exactly the alien. Only when they have been acclimated, so to speak, of the horrible beings, they are allowed to stand in security positions. Before these acclimations were done, we had 2 guards die of a heart attack as the aliens came down the hallway unexpectedly. Let's see. And the last clip is here's one for you, Dan. And the last clip is of the Kennedy assassination. You've heard of the second gunman theory. Well, this is the second camera recorded exactly what happened. We had 4 gunmen, and at the bottom line was Kennedy had to go. He insisted on releasing what little alien information we had told him about, and he was trying to withdraw troops from Vietnam, which we were using as a diversion to the public. After Kennedy, we never told a president anything. Nixon knew because he was briefed as a VP in 1952. That's how we knew where to take Jackie, or that's when he took Jackie Gleason to the Homestead Air Force Base to see the alien bodies we had in storage there. So, again, this is a supposed briefing. This was on Coast to Coast many years ago, but the fact that all this is laid out there like this, like if someone told you that and said, okay, here's everything, would you release that to the public?
Huh, good question.
From what standpoint? Like, As in you're the president? As in you're just some whistleblower guy, or what?
You're a broadcaster with a primetime network slot, and they're saying, okay, should we take this to the public?
I think the biggest thing is there's no credibility. There's no proof. I mean, you have people like Alex Jones who've been saying things forever, which he's been right about a ton, but everybody just thinks he's nuts. I mean, he is nuts, but, you know.
It's globalist.
I think, I was going to say just real quick. I mean, if it's just some reporters talking about it, I mean, most people will just dismiss it. But I mean, if that came from, like you were just saying, like Buddha was asking, are you the president of the United States? Now that's a different question.
Well,
if you're the president of the United States.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The briefing, all of this information would be put out there, and with government officials and all, you know what I'm saying? Like, would you put it out there? Knowing that, okay, this is the part that's most shocking here. Again, I'll bring this up, and it says, at this point, it became apparent to all involved that there was no such thing as a God, or at least how the public perceived God. Like, between that and then humans being an experiment based, you know, like...
I wouldn't.
If that being true, like, what would happen to the world?
Right. I wouldn't. If I was a politician, the president, for example, and they said, do you want to go ahead and release this information? I wouldn't, because that would be immediate destruction. People would just go. So a lot of people would be like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's really interesting. And then you would have another half of the people that would just, you know, there's no God. They can't believe that there's, you know, there can't be any other, you know, races, or not races, but any other life forms other than us. It would be mass hysteria, as Buddha just said before. I think.
Buddha?
Man. I think even if you did, you'd still have a huge, giant chunk of the population that would just not believe you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, dude, in a couple weeks, they have to release all that UFO shit, and they had that dude who was just on the news like yesterday, just coming out. I think he was like former Secretary of Defense, just coming out and saying, yeah, there's some shit out there doing maneuvers that humans are not capable of doing, our technology is not capable of doing, and yes, it's been monitored for a long time. So he basically came out and said that, and that was like a day or two ago. And like I said, I think they had 180 days from when that bill was signed, so it's coming up to where they allegedly have to release, you know, declassify a ton of the UFO stuff.
Who signed the bill?
It was in the COVID stimulus, the first one in December.
So it was still while Trump was in office.
Correct.
I thought they already released a bunch. I thought they already released some stuff on that.
They released some, but they said, like, whatever the guidelines were, it's like all of this up to blah, blah, blah has to be released, like, in 180 days.
What does that have to do with anything in that bill?
Nothing.
That's true. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. And that's going to segue us out of here for tonight. But yeah, insane that bill's gone through, and that's lumped in there with that.
But just in case any of the aliens get COVID.
But how much truth do you believe when you're being told from a liar? You know what I mean? Oh yeah, this is it. Meanwhile, like, nobody believes the fucking government. Come on.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Regardless of whether it's true or not, if that came out and they had pictures and everything to show, is it fabricated? Is it real?
Well, I don't know.
You'd still have a good chunk of the population that wouldn't believe it.
There's still a ton of people that don't believe anything with the moon landing. You know, like, there's so much stuff that, and it's not like some random guy on the internet's like, that never happened. Like, you have credible people being, well, define credible, but, you know, you have intelligent people arguing on both sides for really every major argument. So why would aliens be any different?
Yeah, you got a good point there. All right, well, do you guys have anything to close it down with?
I'm good.
All right. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. Well, for Dan Rainey, Steve Gibson, and anyone that's ever participated in the Type 3TV Echosphere from Mistake on the Lake. Let's see. What else is the heart of it all? The heart of rock and roll.
Rock and roll
Cleveland
capital of the
is
world.
the city that parties so hard we set the water on fire.
There you go. From
Couple
that,
times.
yeah,
Yeah, a couple times. True
Deep-
story. Look it up.
deep within the Great American Rust Belt. I'm Gavin Jameson. This is Type 3 TV. Tune in next Thursday. We'll be on at 8 p.m. Until then.